is now, so I'll call the September 13th, 2022 Layton Mills Public Works Board meeting to order. Misty, could you do the roll call, please?
Mr. Picard?
Here.
Mr. Temperley?
Here.
Ms. Curler?
Here.
Mr. Polachek? Mr. Reich? Thank you.
Up next is the correction and approval of the minutes of August 9th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the Public Works Board meeting minutes from August 9th of 2022.
I'll second that.
All right, I think, we'll do a roll call vote on that then, Misty?
Mr. Temperley?
Oh, you got
Just
a
a
correction?
moment.
sorry, Ms. Bell.
Yeah, I think I noted a couple of corrections. One is I believe that Mr. Temperley ran the meeting and was called to order, so it's stated as Vice President Mark Picard
Oh, yeah, that's
on
true.
the second line, so I think it was the opposite the month before, so.
True.
And then I noted under the ATV item, there were motions to remove from the table and then to return it to the table, but I didn't see any votes recorded. And I looked through my notes and I didn't find what the votes were, so I don't know if anybody else had that, but
I was the only one who voted no against retabling it.
you voted no against retabling it?
Yeah, everybody else voted to table it. Are you
Okay.
getting that, Misty?
Yeah, I wasn't at that meeting. Would it be easiest to just bring these back to the next meeting?
All right,
After giving Sam an opportunity to review her notes and make corrections,
all right.
just to be sure.
Okay, yeah. We'll move approving August 9th minutes for the next meeting.
Sounds good.
All right, next is questions and public comment. Are you here for you, Catherine?
Yes, I
You
am.
You want to just be part of the agenda item, or you have to leave?
I can be part of the agenda item, whatever you prefer. I was going to give public comment, so I could just get my
I want
comments
you
out
to
of the
be,
way.
well, you're the ordinance writer, so it'll be appropriate to have you be part of the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So. All right, anybody else? Greg's here for the bike. Anybody online?
Yeah, I tried.
Looks like
I'm
there's
here
some-
on phone. I keep signing in on the computer and it kicks me off. But I'm
That's Greg Paul.
so I joined.
Oh, it's Greg. Oh, Greg's joining us, Misty.
Thank you.
Okay.
I joined. Yep.
All right, we'll move on the director's report then.
Excuse me, thank you. I think the first thing I'd like to do is officially introduce Drake Daly. He's the new city manager.
Oh, use the mic, Paul.
I'm sorry. First thing I'd like to do is kind of officially introduce Drake Daly. He's our new city manager, and I'm glad he's here, sitting in the first chair there. So, Drake, second day on the job. We were pleased he came back today.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an old joke, but it works every time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, first thing, you've seen this every month now for several months. Staffing continues to be a real issue with us. We were able to hire an apprentice line worker in the electric department. That brought our crew from 2 to 3, and we are now interviewing a gentleman on Friday, another journeyman line worker, hopefully fill out that crew. In the meantime, then, we had one gentleman on the water department and one from the street department quit. And so we've got 2 more positions to fill in those 2 departments. And of course, we continue to look for 1 more employee in the wastewater treatment plant. It's been frustrating in that we thought we had some positions filled, and then people leave for what they perceive as greener pastures, I guess. So it's been a tough time. I know this is not unusual for pretty much any employer right now. It is difficult to get some continuity, and in some of the positions, it's really leaving us with having difficulty make sure we can keep up and pay attention to all the DNR regulations and that sort of thing. But We've got some plans that we're going to talk with Drake about to see if we can improve our retention. And you'll also see when we talk about the budget that we may be having to look at, some changes in wages and that sort of thing. But we can talk more about that a little bit later. Good. All right, next one, wastewater treatment plant. We do continue to look at the siting of the new plant and some other things. To that end, we would like to invite all of you, and I think we've mentioned this, to go to Rockford with us on Monday. That's this coming Monday, and Lisa will be attending that. We're going down to look at the treatment plant in Rockford because they're using this new process that we've talked about. We talked about last weekend or last month. And, just kind of let you see how different it is. I think, Greg, you're going with us also on Monday. So if you would like to do that, please let me know. Basically, we'll drive down there, or you'll kind of drive down there on your own, carpool as you wish. We'll start a meeting with them at 11, probably take a little lunch, and then actually go and see the process in action. We found that order of things is a little more palatable than if you see it in operation and go to lunch. So that's coming up, thanks. That was kind of a delayed reaction there. So that's on Monday, just let me know. And then I think the final thing on the list is street maintenance, so I'll ask Dwayne just to give you a quick update on that.
Thanks, Paul. First project, you probably noticed that Oak Street is under construction. Completion date is tentative substantial completion is the mid to late October. Things are proceeding. I believe the sewer is all but in the main line and looking to have the water main start soon if it hasn't already today. As far as chip seal program, I believe the street department was sweeping the chip seal that occurred throughout the city, mainly in the Brookstone subdivision. They began sweeping today. They'll take several rounds, probably sweeping today and tomorrow, and then any kind of further passes to make sure that those loose chips are picked up. At the same time, they'll be picking up the no parking signs in those areas. Things went well. The county, again, provided that service, and things seem to be looking well. We'll be out with Mark later this week once the sweeping is complete to see how things look. There's also, you'll notice throughout the city, mainly probably in the Ridge subdivision, Pinnacle Drive, you'll see a lot of sidewalk repairs. That sidewalk repair program is still underway. Schweiger Construction, who has the concrete bid, will continue probably throughout September and October to complete some of those. While not on the list, but it does kind of fall under that, many LSLs still being done yet this fall. I think we saw almost a half a dozen of requests permits today, I believe.
Yeah, I think we're closing in on 25, 30 of them this year so far.
And so, thanks, Paul. And with that, we'll have continued patching with not only with the street department and their skid steer loaded paver, which is going very well for patches. We do have a couple other larger patches that we'll look to either work with the county on. We're exploring that as well as a potential add-on on the Oak Street project. So as far as maintenance, if you have any questions, that's still things that are being done yet this fall before the snow flies, the leaves fall, and
Don't
other
say
projects that will that will hit the street department shortly.
Already.
Just a quick question on, just out of curiosity, on Oak Street, were there a number of LSLs? I mean, that's an older neighborhood. Were there some people that took advantage of doing those replacements with the timing of
Yes,
the
I
construction?
don't know the exact number, but I think we were able to get to everyone that had one and get it taken care of, so that went well, yes.
Super.
Any more questions? No. All right. We'll go on to agenda item number 6, discussion on designated bike lane trails. You can come up, Greg. This came from a request to you from a family in Brookstone?
Yeah. Your questions for me?
Well, yeah, just trying to, where this all came from, it seems to have blossomed. So, yeah, go ahead. I mean,
Yes, it came from a family in the Brookstone area where they wanted to have their children to be able to get to the downtown area, to go to the library, use that as a corridor to get to school as well. And they weren't just concerned about their family, they were concerned about a lot of young families in the Brookstone area just having a way to get from Brookstone to the center of the city where a lot of business takes place. And of course, there's a park in that area as well.
Were they hoping for a designated bike trail with its own right-of-way, or, I mean, I can understand why they don't want to use the county road.
Well, they're of course hoping for the shortest route possible, so they were specifically asking about East Lake Street.
So painted bike lanes is what they're requesting.
Correct, yeah.
But, I mean, the first summer, so we've never voted for painted bike lanes on South Main. That was imposed on us by the DOT. And my experience as a bike rider is they don't offer much protection. I mean, the first summer it was open, I almost got hit by a truck carrying a boat trailer.
Well, I happen to live on South Main at this point, and the bike lanes are very heavily used. It's
Right.
a great corridor between the bike trail on the south side of town to the downtown area. I can probably look out my front window and see a bike pass.
Right, but that's always
Anytime
been
during the day.
Yeah, but that's always been the case even before we painted bike lanes, though. Right.
I did use South Main before there were bike lanes,
Yeah.
yes. But it wasn't near as heavy as it is today.
Right, and that we had to remove a parking lane. So if you move a parking lane on East Lake Street, that might impact Doyle's dogs, because on weekends, both sides of the street are filled.
That would have to go to city staff. I don't know if they would have to remove one or both parking areas on both sides. So,
Both.
Probably both. I biked it and imagined. So if you move both parking lanes, I think Mr. Doyle needs to be contacted because that will impact his business.
I think everybody would be contacted as part of the process if that was put into place, right?
Yeah.
Everybody that's affected.
Yeah,
yeah, it would also all the residents along
Yeah.
Lake Street as well.
right. But what about Gill Street, though? I drove that myself. That's a wide street, no parking at all. That's a safe route, correct, from Brookstone?
I'm not familiar with Gill Street, so I can't comment on that. I'm
It
just gonna
runs
talk.
parallel with East Lake Street.
Okay. So there's Water Street, and then after that is Gill Street?
Yeah,
Or Giles, is it?
Guile.
Giles,
Yeah, Guile,
okay.
Gilles.
Okay.
I never really been on it until it was mentioned that,
But Giles doesn't go to Brookstone, though.
well, you can,
That must dead end into Planar, correct?
Yes.
What used to be
Or,
Planar?
Yeah.
Hamlin
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
Grove
Excuse me.
Street.
Yes.
So Giles into Grove Street then turns into Jefferson, which would lend itself to either the spur trail extension or CP Avenue.
yeah.
And then the spur trail on American Way already has a designated paths from that point just north of Jefferson Street.
So you're saying there's a way to get from Brookstone to the downtown on these other roads, but it's not one straight shot, it's, some different streets and turns required.
Correct. There are a number of options throughout the city
Well, yeah,
to provide that.
every street
route.
in the city is a bike route, pretty much.
Yeah, and if I may, what's happening here now is exactly the discussions that we had internally. And that's
Right.
why this kind of blossomed, I guess, because as we got to looking at this, we thought maybe we better take a look at the whole thing. As you see in the memo, I think the last time we really took a good hard look at bike routes was 2005. And I'll be straight up, not a lot has been done since then. There was some signage and that sort of thing. So that's why, as part of Greg's request, we'd like to really take a look at this and map these things out. We do have some maps, I think they're in your packet of material, and just do it right. And with this coming on, if you will, the heels of the ATV discussion, it just seems appropriate that we don't just piecemeal it, that we have an overall plan. So the general request here, and I'm not trying to kick this.
Todd, do you have any more questions for me, or? It
No,
looks like
I'm
we're in
sorry,
the
I'm
staff
sorry.
discussion at this point, right?
Well, a board, but I just see issues with taking away both parking lanes on that street, because there's.
Yeah,
it's a
and that could
popular-
happen on other streets also, of course,
Right.
as we look at this. So we want to make sure that we're not doing more damage than good.
Yeah,
So I'll sit down. If you have any other questions for me, I'll be glad to come up. But I think the questions we're getting into are covered by the staff discussion and memos at this point, so.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. I didn't mean to interrupt your discussion there, but thank you. So the recommendation we're kind of making tonight is, and we actually have started this, but let us take a closer look at the bike routes, what is involved in signage, what routes would work, what obstacles there are, like taking away parking, et cetera, and, you know, come back with more of a little more detailed plan. The other thing, we would probably like to talk a little bit more about this in the comprehensive plan, not real specific stuff, but just the idea of how we want to position Lake Mills in regard to bike trails and that sort of thing. And I guess we're kind of asking that be your discussion right now. What is this on your priority list? How much time do you want to invest? You know, you mentioned, Todd, that was kind of forced upon us to put the bike rails on or bike lanes on South Main. Do we want to do a lot of painting? Do we want to have a lot of bike routes? So we're looking for some direction, I guess is all I'm
yeah,
saying.
but as a bicyclist myself, though, I say I can go anywhere I want on any street. I don't need signs telling me what's the best way. I mean, some streets I do avoid during rush hour, but then at night, you know, East Lake Street, there's nobody on it, so.
I have a question about maps. There was mention of maps that Dwayne prepared. I didn't see anything in my packet on that. So is there maps for the city or not?
Go ahead.
So thanks. So I did do some research after the last meeting. Let's start with, there is a map associated in the Strand 2005 study. And we contemplated putting that as a separate map, and then we ultimately said,
There's a map there.
there's a map in there.
Okay.
So if you're looking for the recommendations that were in the Strand study from 2005, they're inside that report. We also then added, during the research, we found that there is a Jefferson County map that is online. There are multiple versions. I think the first version was in '05 as well. And in doing searches of both of Public Works Board minutes, council minutes, and some emails, we did find out, and communication with Mary Truman at the Parks Department at Jefferson County, we come to find out that the Parks Department actually had some correspondence with Jefferson County with some sign grants back in '04, '05, and '06. And with that grant from the county, the signs were provided to the city. And I understand that the street department put those signs up. And if you look at the route sign document that I provided, which shows what we did is we went around the city and tried to find as many signs on the routes that were in the Strand study as possible. And those were the signs that we found. It does appear that those were the signs that were applied for and the routes that are shown on the Jefferson County map and are currently still on the Jefferson County map. In 2005, the routes were exactly the same on the Jefferson County map as they are today, except for South Main Street, which we've already talked about. So the signage kind of coincides with that same time frame. And to Paul's point, there really hasn't been, by either this board or by councils in the last 17 years, a desire to, or at least a direction to staff to increase to all of the recommendations that were made in the Strand study. Again, back to Paul's comment, I think we're here today to determine whether or not there should be further analysis of some of those routes or further improvements to those routes. And as was stated earlier, routes can be anything from a map. For example, Jefferson County has this map with
Right,
routes.
for tourists, right. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, how to get to downtown from Glacier Drumlin. Right.
But they don't generally have signs throughout all of their routes that they show on their map, in this case. Routes can be shared use paths, American Way, for example.
Yeah, but people are smart enough to figure that out. Right?
So summary-wise, I also did a spreadsheet. Well, surprise, surprise, Dwayne did a spreadsheet.
And I would appreciate more explanation on the spreadsheet. I looked at it and it's like, whoa, once again, there's a lot of information there.
That was as much for internal. So the information there are the 10 routes from the Strand study, plus some of the shared use paths that are in the city. The colors associated with it. What I tried to do was use our Whistler rating information in our database, as well as some from the county. So if you notice, there's some in yellow, some in red. The yellow would mean that it's in the city limits. Red would mean it's in the county limits. Much of the information then that is white or has a white row means that I added and it's either off-road or wasn't included in the Whistler data.
Okay.
Does that help? Is there specific questions then within the spreadsheet that?
Is there a reason you included the Whistler information? Is that important for bikes or just curious?
The reason I included the Whistler data is anticipation that this discussion will move further. Already today, we've talked a little bit about what does it mean on East Lake Street. While we will need to confirm the widths and the lengths, mostly the widths. If you're going to ask me the question about can we do bike lanes on East Lake Street, I'm going to use this spreadsheet to quickly answer the question, potentially to say, no, we need to remove the parking in order to fit the 2 lanes in the current street configuration.
So the Whistler's for the width more so than the rating.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
There's not much right of way left either, right? If the utility poles and the sidewalk,
Correct.
and we don't have the money. One thing to note that after 2005 was when the state passed a 0% tax levy increase limit. So
that might have something to do with the progress that we've made.
Oh,
on
it's
the bike
everything.
routes.
To
Is that
do,
what
it's
you're
everything to
saying?
do with the progress.
Yeah,
Since
right.
then, staff has struggled to present budgets for what we are doing now, which is streets. And I don't think it's a good time to be adding bike routes because, like I said, people are smart enough to know every street in Lake Mills is a bike route. And they're smart enough to know what to avoid in certain days and certain times of days.
I do have a couple thoughts. I was thinking about the citizens' request in maybe a broader way, rather than just saying, should we establish bike lanes on East Lake Street, yes or no, but that there is a need or an expressed need from people that live in Brookstone, which is a growth area, for our community, to want to get downtown and to want to get to the schools. So I personally think it would be helpful if we could get a little bit more analysis from staff on what might be the options to facilitate that. And I don't think they would have asked if they felt that the existing street system met their needs. They seem to maybe want something that's a little bit safer. And so maybe it doesn't have to be on Lake Street, but it's not super obvious what those alternatives might be. So I think it might be helpful to look at that a little bit more and explore, what would be some other options that could be used and what would be involved in that, would there be some costs involved? Would it be establishing bike lanes or marking things as a route, or just having a map to, help people figure out here's a safe way to go with your kids? I don't know, there could be a bunch of different ways to go about it, I suppose.
I think we're pushing too much on staff. This is pretty simple for anyone who lives in Lake Mills and who rides a bike to figure out how to get from here to there on a bike.
So what, if that's the case, then why does this person contact a city council person?
I don't know,
Well, apparently not everybody feels the same way as you do if they
Yeah.
did that, right?
right? But, I mean, I figured it out.
Well,
I mean, I understand, yeah, East Lake Street, yeah. Some days I wouldn't want to ride there, but just have to explore the city a bit.
I ride a bicycle quite a bit. I commuted by bicycle for many years, for a mile or two from the east side where I lived to the east side where I worked. I just recently took a relatively inexperienced bicycle person around the city for several trips to help her learn how to ride a bicycle. So everybody's got a different opinion. I have a different opinion than somebody else as to what works and what doesn't. I'll just give you one of my opinions, and that is that a street like East Lake Street, if it doesn't have cars parked on it, it's pretty wide and pretty bikeable, in my opinion. If there's cars parked on it, that creates a choke point.
Yeah.
So perhaps there's a compromise between parking and bicycles that doesn't cost a whole lot of money. It might be signage as opposed to, markings even on the street, or restrictions on parking. This is one of the issues that I talked to previously when we talked about the new housing project down by Mud Lake Road. And it was discussed quite a bit, and I have an interest in bicycles, and there's a state park south of there, and it was discussed that that's not going to be a major road, yet it is the most direct route to that state park. So to me, it makes sense to have a way for people to bicycle to that state park to get from downtown to eat to the park or whatever. But I'm not a big fan of 50-foot wide pavements either, where you have 2 parking lanes and 2 bike lanes with protection for the bicyclists. So in my mind, a reasonable compromise is to have temporary parking on that street so that people can have a party and have guests over and park on the street for a few hours, but not have overnight parking. Some people have a nice driveway, but they like to park their vehicle on the street. There's somebody near me that does that. Not a problem if the street's wide enough, but that's a potential compromise that doesn't cost a lot of money. And that's just one opinion. That's mine. Lots of other opinions out there. But I do support looking in general at what we can do to make the city more bicycle friendly. I think there's things we can do without spending a lot of money.
I wonder if Greg has any thoughts. I know he's on the line, and hopefully he hasn't had any trouble with his connection.
Are you there, Greg?
Yep, I sure am.
Do you have anything to add? I think you're cutting out. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
I can hear you just fine.
Oh, you're very, very
I
faint.
think- How's this?
That's better.
That's
Is that better?
Okay, so I'm by the window. Well, I think we should be bike friendly. But I also am concerned about removing parking from the street, especially for a business that's a good viable business in the community. Perhaps there's a compromise that there's a way to go around and use the less traveled roads. If I were on a bike, I want to use the less traveled roads. They're a little bit safer. I would go around East Lake, around Doyle's dogs, if that's the choke point that we're talking about. I see a lot of people, I live on Ferry, I see a lot of people using Ferry instead of Main Street because it's a north-south. It's less busy, although it is busy, but it is less busy than Main Street, and so it's it's an alternative, north-south alternative. And I see a lot of bikers on Ferry because of that. So I think maybe that might be a way to have it on Lake, go around certain choke points on East Lake, if that's what's needed. I do think that the north-south corridor and the east-west corridor, the main arteries, should be user-friendly to all people, whether you're on a scooter. And I see a lot of scooters on Ferry. Not the scooters, I'm sorry, but the mopeds, not motorcycles, but the mopeds. And I see quite a few of those too. And oftentimes they're over towards the end, like a bike aisle, very similar to a bicycle rider, not in the middle, but they do have the right of way to be in the middle, just like a regular vehicle, as far as I know. But so I'm just thinking the north-south, the east-west main arteries should be user-friendly to all vehicles. But I also think that some of it's common sense. That I don't know that we need to sign all different every street with bicycle lanes. So if you go to Madison, though, city of Madison has bicycle lanes everywhere, almost too many in terms of. But me as a driver in a vehicle, when I see a bike lane, I'm a little more cautious when it's painted like that. So. There are some safety considerations in using and painting bicycle lanes. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and one observation on South Main, have you gone by on garage sale day? If we did that for Doyle's dogs, it'd be like that all the time on weekends. So we have to make a decision. The police are going to have to make a decision to make everyone their criminals and start handing out parking tickets, or look the other way, in which case, why even have painted bike lanes? So we have to consider what we put the police through when we put these bike lanes in an area that we know that people are going to park in them.
And just a question, Paul or Dwayne, I know there are some places in town where we have off-street paths. And is that, I know you maybe haven't done a full analysis, but isn't there?
It's usually a planning commission, right? When they approve plats for subdivisions. I mean, that's how that bike path came to be over there. That was part of the planned development.
But the part of the path along American Way was not part of that and was added later, correct?
Yeah, was it a TIF district? Or a grant? I was gone the night you guys voted on that. It came from somewhere. I thought it was either a TID grant. It was TID money.
Was it TID or some other fund, county fund or something?
No, I thought it was part of the TIF when American Way was extended through Wallace
Yeah,
Park.
we got enough development. I was gone that night. You don't remember that?
Well,
Yeah.
regardless.
Regardless, but
The point is that we don't have to rely on the plan commission to put stuff in ahead of time.
right.
That's where I was going on that statement.
Yeah, and in some cases, we're after the fact with this.
Yeah.
We can certainly make it a requirement or discuss it as part of a requirement in future developments, but we're talking about existing territory in many
The
places here.
damage has been done. Our city is over 150 years old, and
Yeah.
150 years ago, they didn't envision cars and bikes. So, and our railroad didn't come through the center of town like Fort Atkinson or Madison. We don't have a railroad, or like New Glarus, we don't have a nice railroad right away to use.
We are using the portion that,
Yeah. well, the
or a
spur.
portion of it.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, it didn't come through anywhere near downtown.
But that spur does go another block, actually used to go to Jefferson Street, actually went even further than that, but
That's correct.
Yeah, I
that's,
think
that's another possibility of a possible bike improvement that maybe wouldn't cost too much money.
yeah, I think we still do have the right of way, right?
I think most of it we do.
Also, I think it goes even north of East Lake Street.
I believe everything north of Jefferson
Yes.
has been vacated,
Yeah.
Okay.
but there is a portion from where the parking lot is on CP Avenue to Jefferson that is a potential for an extension of that spur.
Right.
So I would make the statement that regardless of state funding of the city, bicycles have not been a focus of city planning for the last 15 years or whatever, for other reasons than just lack of funding. And I would like to see a little bit more focus on bicycle planning for bicycle transportation planning.
I see extending the spur up to Jefferson Street is more viable and safer option than painting lanes on East Lake Street at this time.
I'd like to direct city staff to just kind of look over the city as a whole and see what can be done in general. And then also, that's a general goal, a general directive, a little more focus on bicycle transportation. And then, in particular, a particular focus on Brookstone to downtown bicycle transportation. So, and overall, like I think, Paul, you were talking about, but also a little more focus on the Brookstone. Because there are several possibilities down there that staff have talked about, I know. I think you've indicated that, and let's bring those back to, think about them a little bit more and bring them back to the Public Works Board. Does that sound reasonable? Does that sound reasonable to the people on the board here?
I agree with that, Mr. Picard, and I think particularly, we do have the citizen request, and just to say, well, we didn't really do a full evaluation, but we just dismissed your idea, that doesn't seem very, I think it's worth a little bit of staff time to look into this further, and then we can still decide not to recommend any further action, but maybe just exploring a little bit more what the options are, and as you said, Mark, there may be some options that are less costly than others, and then that we could weigh that as well.
And staff has had some input from Todd and other people here as well tonight, so to consider with
Yeah,
that.
I'd be more curious on that right away, see how much we have.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for, just a little direction, and I think that makes sense. Well, I think it'll take a couple of iterations, if you will, but I think it's worth it. What I'm hearing, just to confirm, is, we don't want to go whole hog and spend big dollars on this, but let's see what we can do to make it. I think the phrase that's been used many times is user-friendly. So we'll keep that in mind as we proceed.
If I may, as the weeks progress, if there are certain routes, as you're looking at the spreadsheet or the map, if there are certain routes that, besides the one from Brookstone to downtown, that you would like us to focus on a little more or not focus on? And for example, some of them, I think the one that follows Rock Creek, that would be probably an expensive one because it would be right away purchasing intensive, but it is presented there. And there may be other alternatives, right? Brewster Drive or another street to get north and south from that Arbor Creek Trail. But some direction, I think, is what Paul is asking as well. So if there are some things after tonight even that on a specific route that you would like us to focus on a little more, I would appreciate that. And then back to your original question on the ratings, some other reasons why I have the ratings. If the rating's a 3, maybe not the best place to send our bicyclists.
Well, that's for the adventurous.
Off-road
Off-road, yeah, right.
biking, mountain biking on the roads.
And I also included a column for parking for the example I gave, but also for curb. So for example, while it is one of our routes that's signed, there's a portion of South CB Avenue that has curb only on one side. On the other side, it's a loose gravel shoulder, which over time will kind of trend into the pavement. And that's not conducive to bicycle traffic as well, as you can probably understand. So those are some of the reasons why I had some additional information that as we proceed, we'll talk
It's in
about.
the TIF district though, isn't it? There's no money left in that, TID? Or is that closed? I always assumed that would be curbed and gutted as part of the TID project, but,
It is currently in the bill funding application for South CP Avenue.
but yeah, okay.
And if we are fortunate enough to receive funding, that street would get the curb and gutter and the water main replacement that is in much need.
All right.
Yeah, I was just going to add that comment. I think that, because this map we're looking at, the one I'm looking at is pages 30 and 31 from the Strand report, at the end of that report. And of course, that was 2005, and now we have development south of the bike trail there. We have the school, the Lutheran church and school, the potential intermediate school. So we'll be talking about that area more, I'm sure, and so we might as well think about bicycles while we're at it in that area.
And you'll note that on the bottom sheet, I've added some other off-street trails that, for example, the trail that was constructed from the glacial drumlin to St. Paul's is in that list as well.
I've got kind of a stray question, but are bicycles prohibited on sidewalks?
No, that's a touchy subject.
Okay,
Downtown they are.
Well,
Downtown.
let's clarify.
downtown they are, like by ordinance? Okay,
I tried to propose banning it. We had an adult bicyclist sue the city because she went off the sidewalk and tried to sue the city. So the argument is that people need kids to learn how to ride bikes on the sidewalks, but we can't have an age-specific ordinance saying kids 8 and under can ride bikes, adults cannot. That was the opinion of the previous city attorney.
Sounds like age discrimination. I mean, I'm not sure.
Yeah, right.
Well, I ride my bicycle sometimes on the sidewalk, and I think it's a safe place to ride a bicycle, and if there's a pedestrian that I'm approaching I'm approaching them or they're approaching me, I go off on the next driveway onto the street, and maybe I'll stay on the street, maybe I'll go back on the sidewalk. Not a big deal to me.
But there's been some issues of line of sight, kids coming down hills very, very fast, and the sidewalks are deeper than the street, and people backing out have had close calls. So far, it's just close calls. So,
And any time that vehicles cross other vehicles, whether it's a pedestrian, bicycle, or car, or
Yeah.
ATV, there's the potential of accidents, and it can't be avoided 100%.
If you look, the downtown sidewalks are marked, I believe it's no bikes or skateboards, if I remember right.
yeah,
We should probably put hoverboards and all that stuff on it too.
I haven't seen hoverboards.
So, okay, I think we've got some general direction,
Right.
and we'll just keep coming back and keep working on it.
All right. All right, let's do agenda item number 8, so Catherine can go home. So we have a tabled motion. I'll entertain a motion to untable it.
I'll make a motion to remove motion 22-9-1 from the table.
I'll second it, Mark.
Roll call vote, Misty?
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Polachek,
Aye.
Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley,
Aye.
motion passed 4-0.
All right, back up for discussion.
Ted, can I just, one quick comment? And
Yeah.
then, the only thing we've added from previous agendas is the report that Dan put together as to what other cities are doing. Otherwise, all the information is the same. And then I'll note that Lisa presented some information for you also. So with that, we'll let you go.
What was the information from Dan?
Yeah, and if I may, and I don't know, Mr. Palchik, if there's a way, Misty, maybe you could forward this document to him. I just, in preparing for tonight's meeting, I just went back and looked through my notes from our last 2 discussions, as well as all the documents that we've received, and I listed what I think are like all the possible things that we could recommend to the city council, so I'm not proposing necessarily that we recommend them all, but these were all things that came up during our discussions or their so for example, and Greg, I'll just summarize this briefly since you don't have it in front of you, and maybe Misty can send it to you, but we had a suggestion from Bennett about seeking public input through a non-binding referendum or public hearing. We have Police Chief Selk's memo, which lists a number of requirements that he recommends be added to the ordinance. We have Attorney Drescher's memo, which included a number of ordinances from the local area and even outstate that had a few other requirements that were different. There was ideas about reducing speed limits on particular roads. I think that was actually in the police chief's memo. Dwayne gave us a memo back in July, and he had some additional recommendations in there that we could consider. There also was an idea that to table the ordinance until Jefferson County completes their review, which they're scheduled to do in November, and then the one last idea to table it until the comprehensive plan is updated. So I was just kind of coming up with all of these for my own notes for tonight, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just share them with everybody and we can decide if, which one of these we like or don't like or whatever, cross some out. And hopefully it would be helpful to come up with a recommendation tonight.
Thank
Did
you.
Catherine see this?
Thank
Is my understanding, oh, you did?
So-
Oh,
Mr. Drescher handed me a copy right as we started.
okay. Well, do you want to speak to that? And I brought my son once to city council meeting. He was real naughty and he ran around, so.
Oh, so it
Don't-
went better than it's going now.
Yes, it is, a lot better.
Well, I know you just want to get me out of here so the little terror can leave.
That's fine.
Well, to speak to Ms. Curler's recommendations, I did look through them briefly, and the majority of them, at first glance, appear to be already included in the county ordinance, such as age requirements, limiting the hours, and so to the extent that this board makes a recommendation, I would hope that it's along the lines of what the county ordinance already is, so that we don't have like these dueling jurisdictions. And also, my hope is just to keep this ordinance as simple as possible, and again, in line with state law and county and local ordinances. So those are the main things that I noticed about Ms. Curler's recommendations. I generally would not support going to referendum. I think that's a lot of effort for a simple issue that this board can make recommendations on and the council can take up. I generally, there are a couple other ones.
With my understanding, you're going to treat them just like you would a car, right? So
Right.
obviously, there's already laws about open containers,
Yes, and the OWI laws for the state of Wisconsin do
right?
apply.
And having registration with you and a driver's license and speed limits and proof of insurance.
Mrs. Bishop, maybe you can refresh my recollection. I'm pretty sure, but I think you've studied them closer than I have, that Chief Selk's memo, his recommendations align pretty closely with the Jefferson County ordinance. Is that right? So what's item number 2 on my list here? Those were recommended in his memo, but the Jefferson County ordinance actually has like ordinance language for all of those.
Right, so
Is that
for
right?
instance, 2A, the language is actually flipped. I think you couldn't ride from 10 PM to 5 AM. So it
So
is
it's a
prohibitive
prohibition rather
as
than
opposed to
a-
permissive, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the helmet
tail
requirement, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Curler.
You need taillights.
They do need
Oh,
taillights, that's
yeah.
in Wisconsin state law. You need operating lights both forward and rear. Generally, you can't modify the vehicle as it's come off the production line, for those street legal requirements. The helmet requirement for under 18 is a state law requirement. Proof of insurance is interesting because that is not a state law requirement, but it is a county requirement. And so we would be abiding by that anyway, since that's already incorporated into the ordinance as written.
I've got concerns about 2F though. I mean, ATVs can easily hit 60 miles per hour because I followed a couple from Watertown last week. So if we make ATVs drive to the right, everybody have a car and ATV driving parallel at the same speed down the street. I mean, why can't, if we're treating them like vehicles, if I'm gonna drive an ATV, I can usually hit 25 and keep up with traffic. Do you understand my point? Why we would make them, I mean, bicycles, yeah, because the top speed is 10 miles per hour. And we like bicycles to be on the right so they're not slowing down traffic, so there's not a whole parade of cars. But ATVs can usually keep up with cars and streets.
My understanding of the recommendation to ride to the furthest right portion of the road would typically be when somebody is either crossing a road or moving from a trail down a road to a different portion of a trail. If you're riding per,
Yeah, that's out in the highways though, but
Right, and
city
it-
streets though,
city streets, you should be riding in the lane with traffic,
Right,
is my
yeah.
understanding. Yep.
yeah, but I'm reading, or 2F. I mean, that applies to county roads, but I was surprised those ATVs, I was following them at 60 miles per hour. I didn't realize they go that fast.
I think that is in state statute as well.
Really?
Maybe Is that right, Mr. Drescher? Okay.
The citation in state statute.
Really, they
is
make them ride to the right even though they can go as fast as a car.
on the improved surface, as far right as you can go, so as not to impede traffic that could pass you.
Yeah.
But you do have a right to the right of way. Under Wisconsin statute 23.33, 4DF is where that statement comes from.
Right.
And I'll read that in just one moment.
My brother is a spot in a campground. He's got ATVs.
So it's under the heading, under
Yeah.
the statute of operation on or near highway 4D.
Because we're not allowing kids under 16, right? So anyone 16 and over is going to be able to keep up and do 25 easily and not slow down traffic.
So 4D4 reads, on a roadway which are designated as all-terrain vehicle routes, operation of all-terrain vehicles and utility terrain vehicles on a roadway which is an all-terrain vehicle route is authorized only for the extreme right side of the roadway, except that left turns may be made from any part of the roadway which is safe given prevailing conditions. That statement is under appropriate operation standards.
Yeah.
And it is under county statute, or under Wisconsin state statute. I think the way that we're interpreting that may be a little bit conclusory in that this is the guidance. You're not limiting them to being off the improved surface. Roadway is defined as the improved surface rather than the shoulder, which would potentially be gravel or something like that. And as far right as practicable, so as to not impede other forms of traffic, I think is what the intent there is. But I
Right.
haven't seen
How-
that specific portion of the statute be challenged.
How do you think the statute is? Was it created at a time when ATVs were slow? But obviously, they've done a lot of improvements. In
Well,
them.
I think that's a little bit of a slippery slope that you're walking down as well. This is generally, I mean, for the city of Lake Mills is what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And they're only being approved on city roads that have speed limits under 35 miles per hour.
Right,
So-
which is all of
Yeah.
the city. Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking, if someone's going 65 on an ATV in the city of Lake
Oh,
Mills.
no,
that's
yeah, I
different
encourage the
road.
police to pull them over and yeah, but,
I think this requirement in 2F is in, I noticed it in multiple ordinances. I
Yes.
can't say that it was in all
right,
of them.
but do you
that
understand
we
my
saw,
point though? Then we're gonna have cars and ATVs, we're gonna have 2 lanes of traffic.
Well, that's not the intent. And a
I know,
car couldn't-
I know.
A car couldn't pass that ATV just like a bike if it wasn't safe or something like that. I mean, you can't go into oncoming traffic under the rules of the road.
Right.
That's Wisconsin statute 346, the general rules of the road, which it was stated earlier that as a mode of transportation in the right of way, all operators would be subject to those statutes, those rules.
Right,
Consider that ATV riders, if they're experienced and know what the laws are going to be used to riding on the right side of the road on state and county roads, because that's what's required there.
right.
So they may just do that anyways in the city.
Just ride it like a motorcycle.
They may just tend to stay on the right side of the road in a city because that's what they have to do by law in the county.
Or well, in Platteville, they don't drive to the right of the street. I was in Platteville for moving in day. They had ATVs all over the city and they were just,
But what's the law there?
I don't know.
Yeah, I bet you those ATV riders don't know what the law is there either.
Well, no one's pulling them over, so, but it's just safer, right? I mean, I'm in a car, if I see an ATV over to the right, I'm gonna try and pass them, which.
Even if they're going 25 miles an hour? Really?
Most people will do that. So, I'm not suggesting to do it, but
You might get a ticket.
yeah, I know, well, no, I wouldn't do it myself, but other people will.
Well,
So,
it sounds like maybe it's a little bit of a moot point whether
Yeah.
our board would recommend it or not, because it sounds like it's actually in state statute, so.
yeah,
That would be the control.
I guess if there's issues, we can correct it later.
So Dan, would the state statute apply to city ATV routes?
The state statute already applies. Wisconsin statute 23.33 has been adopted in full by the city of Lake Mills. But we have not established any local ATV routes, which is what this ordinance really does.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Craig, I don't know if you were able to get a copy of the document that we're looking at or not, just so you can follow along.
Well, I've got a couple of them up on my computer.
But, I mean, everything else, like,
Which one are you talking about? I've read the chief's memo. I've read the former city manager's memo. I've read the DNR's resources guidelines about signage. I've gone through all of this stuff already. This is really the second time I've gone through it.
Yeah.
I think we should, I think we should have a recommendation and follow the police chief's recommendations. It's really going to be, once you have a signage program, you have to stick to the signage program. It's going to be hard. And like the chief says, it's a convoluted type situation to have to progress to enforce this just on a few roads. I think you have to open it up to all of the roads.
So one area I would note, yeah, Greg, we're looking at a document that I drafted and was just handed out tonight, so it wouldn't have been with your, the other materials. So that's what I just wasn't sure if maybe Misty had a way to send it to you. One thing under number 2, which is the chief's police chief Sauk's recommendations, something that wouldn't have been in the county ordinance is to have a statement that either the city or the police chief has the right to limit use on roadways anytime. That might be if there's some kind of an emergency or some kind of a special event or something like that. And I did see that in a number of other ordinances, so would we want to also
that's vague.
support that?
I mean, why would he do that? Then why wouldn't he limit cars?
Yeah, I think his memo said something about like special events, or I'm trying to remember what the other, emergency circumstances. It would be like any other vehicles where maybe they need to close off a road or something
Well,
like
do we need
that.
to specifically add that, or is it automatically covered? If you're treating them as like a car, I mean, I guess that's fine, yeah, it doesn't hurt to add it, but it just seems.
Dan, would that be covered as, I mean, if this ordinance went through, would it have to explicitly state that the police chief can?
First, I don't mind if it is explicitly stated, if that's your intent. I think the police chief has a general duty and authority over public health and safety and use of the right-of-ways in compliance with state statute. In emergency circumstances and exercising his police powers, I believe that he can shut down any road in the city of Lake Mills under due circumstance. But back to the first point, I think clarity in who has the authority to do that, to shut down the routes on a whim or under a certain standard, would be appropriate under this ordinance. What I did see in my audit of ordinances was there's a common kind of a struggle for power in that circumstance. Oftentimes it's the primary city administrator, the city manager in this circumstance, that would have authority to shut down routes. Oftentimes it was the police chief. In some circumstances, it seemed to require like a board action, which I don't really believe that was never specifically stated. It was more like it wasn't stated as who has authority, and there would be a requirement for board action to amend those routes in the future. So my general statement is I think it doesn't hurt to add that statement if it's your intent. And secondly, generally, the police chief would have authority to shut down any routes as necessary under his police powers.
And that includes streets for cars as well, right?
Certainly.
Yeah, so, okay.
The hours of operations was something I thought would, might be worth a quick discussion. So Jefferson County has, and as Mrs. Bishop pointed out, I think it's listed as a prohibition. So it's prohibited from 10 PM to 5 AM. Do we want to recommend that? Or I noticed that the city of Waterloo starts a little later in the morning at 7.
I'd like to mention that the town of Aston also has the same county
Yeah.
requirement.
Town has the same, and I think the town of Lake Mills also, no?
I don't think the town of Lake Mills has a restriction on time.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it doesn't.
Well, so I guess the question is if, do we want to recommend one? And if so, do we want to stick with what the county has established or set something different for the city or?
I'm neutral on that. I mean, if you pass the time restriction and then if you get a whole mob of people saying no, you can always change it in the
You can
future.
always change it, yeah, that's true. I thought 5 AM seemed to me more of the time that the agricultural activities maybe would be occurring rather than, people recreationally or commuting.
And the garbage guys, yeah.
Yeah, so I was surprised at 5 AM, that was so early, but it's probably for, folks that are working.
Oh, yeah, I'm
most
neutral on
rural.
the hours, so.
So I did include, under number 5 here, a number of things that Dwayne had suggested in his memo, which would be, surveying business owners, looking at the costs, identifying,
What would be the
off-road
cost?
access.
I mean,
Right, I mean, that would have to be evaluated, I guess, are there costs for maintaining signage, are there enforcement costs, are there, road, issues that come up after, use, and maybe those aren't known at this
I
time.
just don't see a whole lot of new traffic being generated.
Yeah, so that was just one of
And
his suggestions.
we already have ATVs in the city. I mean, I see them parked at the market, and I see them drive by Culver's. So I think the chief even mentioned there are.
Right, that there are people that are using
Right.
some of those roads already, yep. Let's see, a couple other things from his memo was limiting the use to specific routes rather than all streets, maybe avoiding areas where there's already high use for the existing right-of-way. He also mentioned the daylight hours. And then there's a couple ordinances, and Dwayne suggested this as well, that have a sunset clause to look at the ordinance on a regular basis. So like if this is approved and maybe people don't like it, or maybe there's some safety issues, that then it could be evaluated after a year or 2 years or something like that.
That's every ordinance. So you always have the option of reviewing ordinances every year if you want. You don't
Yeah,
need-
It's
yeah.
not always compulsory, though. I guess that's what she's suggesting, whether or not you add, like Jefferson County has a compulsory review after a year. I
Yeah.
think that's a mere suggestion. She's not disagreeing with you.
Or okay, but after a year, I could just say, hey, let's go over that ordinance we passed. I mean. unless-
right, so this
yeah.
would be a sunset clause that would require the review, I guess.
Okay,
And I don't
well,
want
that's
to,
fine.
Dwayne, am I understanding that right from your memo? So that would be more of a required review in the ordinance itself.
Yes, and to your point about costs, I mean, costs could be, well, 90% of all vehicle drivers or more, maybe the police chief would know exactly what that, follow the laws, correct?
Yeah.
It's the percentage that doesn't, that will potentially cause costs to both the Parks Department and the Street Department, is my concern. One of the reasons for looking at it as a further review is you will have more data on that cost. We will have more, we should have more data on how many complaint calls we're getting, how much damage repair we've had to do as a staff throughout the city because of the X percent that aren't following the rules.
Are you talking about Parks Department? Because if the parks get vandalized, you don't get the call. That'd be the Parks Director.
And when I meant we, I'm saying the city.
Okay, all right, that's what I'm saying. And if there's reckless driving, the police chief will get called,
Right.
yes.
But as a whole, as the city, all of those things are costing staff time.
Oh, yeah. I just assumed they're recitals. Sounds like you guys are doing a good job of talking to each other, so, all right, that's good. Okay.
And so that was my intent when I talked about cost.
Yeah,
I realize that most operators will operate in the orderly fashion that they should.
Right.
It's-
And
it's-
if you Google this, a lot of communities have passed it. People have used it as an alternative vehicle in a safe manner. But other cities, you've got gangs of ATV riders driving in parks. So, yeah, it could either go good or it could go bad. We just don't know. So we'll just have to experiment.
There could be an uptick in complaints from people that maybe didn't know that this was being approved, and that could produce a workload. There could be noise complaints. I mean, there, uptick in enforcement. So, yeah, I think that's where that sunset period or evaluation requirement could, like you said, Dwayne, you'd have more data in a year or whatever timeframe, the council might decide on to take a look, well, how did it go? We passed this, how did it go? What kind of experience did we have?
That's fine. Because you don't know. Yeah, I can't say this is going to end up good. I just don't know. I would like to think the chances are good, but.
As you see in my memo, I have some concerns.
Yeah,
Because we do experience complaints
all right,
occasionally. Is that a fair statement, Paul?
yeah. But
Okay, so.
But we get complaints about cars. People come in robbing banks, burglarizing cars and homes and using a car to get away. If you Google golf course vandalism, you'll find a lot of golf courses that are vandalized by people doing donuts. So, but the solution isn't to ban cars because for the greater good, people use cars in a safe way. I don't know. What about New Glarus? It's nice to hear from a new city manager, your experience.
The New Glarus Village Board was not interested in allowing
Yeah.
ATVs at the time that I was there. But the town of New Glarus also was not interested, and so that really cut off a vast majority of any access to the village.
Right.
As to, there was diverse opinions of reasoning as to why no one on New Glarus's village board was willing to advocate for that. Not that it won't come up in the future. Greene County did approve an ATV ordinance, and other townships in.
Oh, yeah, they got the trail, the cheese country trail, right? The goes through Monroe and Gratiot, yeah.
But on county roads, and then as well, other townships and other municipalities within Greene County did approve it as well,
Yeah.
so.
So the problem is, these things are built to be scary looking and rugged because that's what they're originally designed for. But from my experience in my brother's campground is there's no blind spot. So we use them to go to the general store to get groceries and go to the swimming pool. And it's much easier to use them than a car. And that's why I think some people are using them to go to the market. Okay, anything else?
Are we ready for a motion?
Well, I guess I would propose that we amend I'll make a motion to amend the Public Works Board Motion 22-9-1 in two places. So I think if we look at the last whereas statement, it says, whereas the Public Works Board has discussed and reviewed the ordinance amendment to Chapter 609 Vehicles All-Terrain and recommends that the City Council adopt the same, as said adoption is in the best interest of the City of Lake Mills. I would make a motion that we amend that to strike the second half of that sentence, so just end the sentence at, Chapter 609 Vehicles All-Terrain. And then, under the be it therefore moved, that we replace the current paragraph that says the Public Works Board does hereby recommend, and replace that with a paragraph that says the Public Works Board does hereby recommend that the city council consider the following. And then we could include item number 2 from the list that I handed out, which I could read out loud if that's important for the record, as well as item number 5G, which would be that review requirement.
So all of 2
All of 2,
and 5G.
and then 5G. And I don't know if Greg has these, so I wonder if I should just read those out loud.
Oh, I could
Okay.
give it to him.
Yeah,
Or Greg.
please read them out.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the motion right now on my
Okay.
computer, but I don't have her memo, but I was following the corrections on the motion that you just made.
Okay, good. So then,
So if I can, Greg does have the police chief's.
he's got the police chief's memos. Okay, so that's really what it
Oh,
is.
yeah.
So we would be recommending, adding the requirements recommended in Police Chief Selk's June 10th, 2022 memo, which are: A, limit hours of ATV, UTV operation to 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. B, helmet required
like-
for any operator or rider under age 18. C, proof of ATV, UTV insurance required. D, vehicles must not exceed speed limit with maximum speed of 35 miles per hour. E, ATV, UTV registration must be displayed on vehicle. F, vehicles must operate on pavement in single file in furthest right portion of road except when making a left turn. G, operators shall follow all other city traffic laws. H, vehicle must have fully functioning headlights, taillights, and brake lights. I, use of additional light bars or lighting is not allowed. J, should we say the police chief has the right to limit ATV use on roadways?
Yep.
It would be lining out city manager and just saying police chief. K, vehicle
Fine.
must meet noise standards.
Yep,
I
I'm
would
reading
say
it.
statutory noise standards because there are noise standards in the state statutes, and no modified exhaust. And then I guess we would, so that would be number 1, A through K, and then number 2 would be for the city council to include a sunset clause or review requirement to review the ordinance on a regular schedule to evaluate specific factors related to impacts of ordinance changes.
That's Lisa's motion, Misty,
So that's my
to
motion.
add all of 2 and 5G to the recommendation. So,
Yep, I got that.
all right, is there a second to Lisa's motion?
I'll second it.
Greg seconded
I'll
that.
second. I've been reading it. I've got the chief's letter right in front of me.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So discussion on the amendment, I think I agree with that. I mean, no harm adding all that, so.
Mark, any thoughts?
No thoughts? So we vote on the amendment first? It's been a while, Dan, since we did an ordinance. We had to
The motion was to
amend, okay,
the recommendation,
all right.
not the ordinance itself.
All right, so the motion to make the recommended changes to the ordinance recommendation. We'll vote on that. Misty, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Polachek,
Aye.
Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley,
Aye.
Ms. Curler.
Aye.
Motion passed 4-0.
All right, so now we have an amended ordinance recommendation. Is there any more discussion on that? Seems like we discussed it. Well, Lisa was going through her recommended changes.
Well, I'll make a motion to adopt Public Works Board Motion 229-1 as amended.
We have that already on the table.
Is it, but as, now that it's amended,
Now
though,
it's
I think
amendment.
we have to redo it, is that right?
Yeah,
Okay, so as amended.
Okay, I'll second that.
all right. Any further discussion? No? All right, another roll call vote, Misty?
Mr. Picard,
Aye.
Mr. Temperley,
Aye.
Ms. Curler,
Aye.
Mr. Polachek.
Aye.
Motion passed 4-0.
All right,
Okay.
all right, thanks, Catherine.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate the board's consideration.
Sure.
Yep.
All right. Now we'll go to item 7, discussion on 2023 utility budgets, streets, wastewater, water, electric. So this is discussion, oops, this is discussion only, not recommendation, or
Yeah, this is kind of your first shot at, or kick at the can, if
first
you will.
shot? Okay.
Yeah, and so what we've done in the past is introduce it at this meeting. You can ask initial questions, comments, suggestions, and then your recommendation will come at the October meeting.
So we talked about staffing issues.
Yes.
So, I mean, I Googled the average salary for a lineman in Wisconsin. It seems to match what you're proposing, but is the internet behind the times, or?
Yeah, I can tell you a couple of things in that regard. First of all, we do have some information from local utilities. Again, they're municipal utilities, Jefferson,
Yeah.
Waterloo, et cetera. And in that regard, we're typically $3 to $4 behind or below what they are. We do always make sure that we compare insurance coverages with that so that we're talking apples to apples. So we will probably be talking about some potential wage increases or wage adjustments there, actually across the board with water and wastewater also. I don't think, generally speaking, I don't think we're too far off, but we are losing, like we lost one lineman to Stoughton, one to Jefferson. We lost a water employee to Oconomowoc. And again, it's about a $4 or $5 differential. When we compare it to the IOUs, we're not even close, but then we're not in that ballpark anyway. So the other thing, and we talked about this a lot, and we talked about this with Drake a little bit this morning, is taking a look at the idea of a multi-year or some kind of a step, a matrix step or something like that, so that staff can look at what the wage is this year, what they can anticipate for the next couple of years. We're trying to adjust our job descriptions so there are different levels in those so that people can work to a higher level and get an increase in wage. Certainly with water and wastewater, for example, there are DNR certifications that those people have to maintain their license. And so as they attain more licenses, there would be a higher wage for them. So we're in the process, as I mentioned, of really taking a look at how we compete with that. And Drake has been here 2 days, and we really started laying a lot of this stuff on him already. And so there's work to be done in that regard. I don't know if it's going to be in time for this particular budget, but it is something we have to take a look at. And the other thing we're doing in this regard, just to fill in a couple more steps here, is taking a look at some potential changes in our handbook. A couple of the items that come up quite often is compensatory time. In other words, instead of getting paid for overtime, they can use comp time. And how much of that can they bank? That's why we lost a couple of guys to the county, that they allow them to bank a pretty good chunk of comp time. There's pros and cons to that, but again, it's something we should take a good look at. And there's some other items that we want to take a look at as far as making it a little more, give us some more ability to retain employees, to make us a little more competitive. So you're going to see that we want to kind of do a little analysis of wages, a little closer analysis of wages. I think you're aware, there's a staffing study that will be started for general employees in the city in January. They're doing one for the EMS fire department real soon. I think it has to be done between now and November. And then in January, take another look at that. So in summary, in that regard, that's a work in progress also. But it's across the board that we have to take a look at just what we're doing. And I think as Drake mentioned in one of our meetings today, we have to develop a strategy of where do we want to fall in competition, if you will, with other communities. And I don't think we want to be the highest paid. We certainly don't want to be the lowest paid, but we have to kind of adjust or adapt to where we want to fall in that regard.
Yeah, I was at a company, and they surveyed us about what makes us happier, and I brought up the comp plan, because at the time, I was getting paid decent enough, but there's some times of the year where you had to work a lot of overtime in projects. And other times of the year where it was slow, it's like, well, just, give me extra vacation time. I'll give that overtime back. So
Yeah.
is there a slow time at all for the utilities?
I didn't hear the question.
Is there a slow period at any given time during the year for utilities where they could slack off and take extra time off?
Yeah, I think from 10 to 10:30 tonight, it'll be.
Unless it rains.
Because I'm in IT, right? And
Yeah.
usually the last half of December was a slow time.
There used to be, quite honestly,
be,
there used to
yeah.
be, and it just isn't the case anymore.
Yeah.
And especially in Lake Mills. There's a lot going on here.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing is that we keep our crews relatively small. And so we keep people busy.
Mm-hmm.
And the slow time just doesn't occur in any of the departments. Not that, everybody's sweating every second of the day,
Right,
don't get me
yeah.
wrong, but there's a lot of work to do.
Well, I know you have some collaboration with equipment sharing, but also with staffing to a certain extent as well?
Yeah, good point, and I appreciate you bringing that up. Yes, we do share equipment quite a bit, as you saw in the capital improvement budget. And we're really looking hard now at not only cross-training, but possibly some cross-certifications. It's not uncommon in smaller towns, and I'm not sure if New Glarus was like this, Drake, but to have water and wastewater employees get certifications for both. We actually have one young man who's on the water crew, was accepted into lineman school. And so we may be looking at taking advantage of more opportunities like that where people can cross the line. Now, the issue we get into there, of course, is that nobody becomes proficient at anything if they try to do everything. And so there's limitations to it, but certainly it's things we have to look at. I will tell you right now that, of course, we have utility people on standby on the weekends, and we do have water staff and electric staff alternate weekends. Now, water staff right now can't go and fix an electric issue or vice versa, but we have found that in probably half of the calls we get, regardless of which department they're in, they can kind of work through it and take care of it without having to put themselves in any kind of a safety issue, which is also a huge concern that we operate safety. So we're trying to look at a lot of different options like that.
Cross-train them enough to be kind of competent on-call weekends.
Yes. Yeah, and also if people are on vacation.
Right.
We really saw this big time during COVID, when we had some staff with COVID, and we got a little concerned that we didn't have enough bodies. I can tell you that a couple of weekends ago, between COVID, a guy leaving, and another guy that had already made plans to be out of town, we didn't have anybody. So what we do in that case, just to make sure you understand, what we do in that case is we have a very nice agreement with Jefferson and Waterloo so that we can call it, and vice versa. They will call us to help. But that's not a long-term solution by any means.
Was that agreement for electric and water and sewer, or?
Yes.
Okay,
And actually even streets.
very nice.
Yeah, we have some good neighbors.
Good.
So that, that's an issue that we need to give Drake some time to really get into and understand and come up with some ideas, but that's a big one. And the other one I want to point out real quick then is in the electric department, it's the cost of purchased power.
It went down. Did I read that right?
Yeah, now if you look at a multi-year trend, the cost is going down. But as we've discussed recently, that the cost per kilowatt hour of electricity or megawatt hour of electricity is probably going to go up. Now, we do have the WPPI annual meeting is Thursday and Friday, and we will be talking with some of the big players in what is called MISO, the Midwest Independent System Operator. They have a lot of control over capacity and cost, just to see what they're anticipating. We are anticipating 3 to 5% increase in the wholesale cost. How we pass that on is going to be up to how we conduct the other about 20 20% of our business. Our purchase power is about 80% of our total budget. So we have direct control over about 20% of that. And the other thing, and we can get into more detail next month unless, do you want to try to put this up? Do you know how to run the Elmo?
How did the full-time salary go down almost like 70,000?
Because we've had so many positions open.
So we're starting over with an apprentice.
Yes, we've got an apprentice who operates at a lower wage, plus if you look at the trend, because we haven't been paying 4 journeymen for full years, the trend indicates it goes down. And so that's why we want to take a look at that and see if we can bump that up. What I'm asking them to do, and I don't know if we'll be able to do it real quick, but if you recall, probably a year, maybe a year and a half ago, as we talked about how we were getting more houses in the city and really not a lot of industrial growth.
Right.
And we predicted at that time that housing was going to flip it the other way, I think. Right, thank you very much. There, now you know how to run Elmo.
Right there.
What we predicted would happen, like I say, a year and a half or so ago, is happening. So what you see on this chart, the blue lines, the blue bar chart is our demand, and then the brownish line chart is our kilowatt hour sales. And what happens, what is very typical when you have a lot of housing and not so much industry, is that the demand begins to exceed the kilowatt hour charges. And that's a difficult situation to maintain because demand then makes up your highest, the highest part of your bill, and you can't keep up with kilowatt hour sales. And so what happens? I mean, it's very clear. People get up in the morning, get ready to go to work, so they create this demand, factories fire up, all that sort of thing, and then the houses shut down. So they've created this peak that you see there, but there's not a lot of kilowatt hour sales to go with it. So we have to have both.
So it's like we build up all this capacity to handle that spikes, but then the spikes go down. So we've kind
That's
of
exactly
overbuilt
right.
spikes.
Yep.
So the demand charge is a factor that's driving our electricity costs. The reason that there's a demand charge imposed by the producers of electricity is, I'm thinking, because it's determined by how big of your capacity your plants are. Now, in the future, with solar and wind, especially with solar, the demand, the supply will not be a fixed amount. It's not like it's going to be variable, and your supply is going to track more closely with your house demand because when the sun shines more, your house demand goes up. You get more electricity and you get more demand at the same time. So perhaps in the future, the rate structure at the wholesale level will change and the demand charge will become less.
Agreed, and that's already starting to happen.
Oh, it is?
Yes, it is, to a certain extent. And it's really actually being driven by the fact that the suppliers are getting into solar also.
Yes.
Yeah, and so how long this trend lasts, I don't know, but we are in that interim. And I bring this up in the context of the budget that I don't think the number we have budgeted is adequate. And so I want to take a closer look at that for '23. And then as things progress, as we get more information about, what the cost is going to do from PPI and from MISO, make some adjustments.
And when you said the budget amount isn't adequate, is that for the wholesale power cost?
Yes.
And that's independent of the, I forget what the term is, the adjustment.
The power cost adjustment clause?
PCAC, yeah.
Well, it's not really. That figures more into our revenues, if you will, because that will always be adjusted to compensate for any changes in fuel from month to month. The purchase power cost itself, just overall, is going to go up. The fuel charges are going to still continue to fluctuate. So the PCAC, although it has some impact on the cost, it really is reflected more in our revenues keeping up with it. So what I'm saying again is that I really want to take a harder look at that number, and it shouldn't, just off the top of my head, it shouldn't go down. It should stay level or maybe go up a tad. Now, the other point I want to make in all three of these budgets is that I think we should get into the mode of every year we do a rate study. Now, I'm not saying file a rate case, but do a rate study to make sure that our rates are keeping up, both revenue and expenditure-wise. WPPI will do the electric one for free, so that's kind of a no-brainer. And then we work with Strand on the water and the wastewater side to do those studies. We're probably looking at a couple $1,000s for each utility, but that gives us a good snapshot of, are we keeping up, are we getting too far behind, or are we fine? And a special note with the wastewater, and we've talked a little bit about this, is to see if we can begin some adjustments to the wastewater rates now in preparation for 2025, 26, when that plant really comes online and we've got some big expenditures there.
You read my mind, Paul, because I was gonna bring that up. So,
Yeah.
because we did talk about that, at a minimum, making sure that the wastewater rates are keeping pace, but can we, start to increase that to decrease some of the shock level, or the shock that there might be when the rates go up more with the new plant.
Yeah, and we can fold that into the analysis and just see what is viable, what's appropriate. Keep in mind, the unique part about the wastewater rates is there is no, if you will, regulatory body that will come in and say, no, you can't do that. But you are, in this case, then the regulatory body. And so it's what do we have, or you have the appetite to do in that regard? So those are really, I think, my basic comments for the initial look at the budget. If there are other questions, we can go over that. Otherwise, send me your questions.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I had some questions on the first page of the water budget, which is page 8 in this PDF that we have. I guess I'm not sure if I'm reading it correctly, but it looks like the top is expenses and the bottom section is revenue. And there's some pretty significant increases in a number of the line items there, like residential or public fire protection. And so I guess I just wanted to understand bonds, what makes those categories have such a big increase over the 5-year period?
Okay, I got to be straight up. I don't know all of the data that Steve used to put this together. And I should note that Steve put this together before he left.
Oh, okay.
And so this is where Drake is going to have to really absorb this thing.
And you can answer it next time too, but it kind of stuck out to me that there was such a big increase in the bottom line
Yep.
between 2022 and 2027. So I just was curious about that.
My conjecture is that we had worked with Ehlers and Associates to look at what we were going to need for rate increases over the years, and I'm going to guess that some of that's figured in here,
Okay.
along with some more growth. But I would really look at 23 closer, because I think that's the only
Okay.
one we have a lot of control over, but I can certainly make sure I'm answering your question properly, and that's what he's figuring in there. But
Okay.
that would make sense to me.
That's fine. Thank you. And I
Any
guess
more
one of the
questions?
One other
Yeah.
question I had, just more broadly, and I guess specifically tied to wastewater, I think at one point we talked either at, like, it may have been at city council, but having Ehlers do a little bit of a deeper dive in anticipation of the new plant, but then that would be provided to Public Works Board and the city council. Just curious on what's the status of that?
Yeah, that would be a kind of a separate look from a rate study. So I guess that'll be a discussion or a decision that we'll have to make and think about. Ehlers is our financial advisor. Makes sense, though. I mean, that's a huge investment, and so all the financial data we can get is going to help.
Yeah, and I think just wondering, like, where, are there going to be some grants, or, are there going to be some things that we can do to manage the rate increase?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Other questions, comments, suggestions?
Greg, do you have any?
No, I'm good.
All right. Do you have any more questions, Mark? All right,
Okay, so you will see a different version next month.
okay. All right, that's end of agenda item 8. Agenda item 9, recommendations for future agendas. Do you have anything for next month, Paul?
Well, I don't know what the status of the siting is going to be. We were going to, of the wastewater treatment plant siting, we were going to take that, to the council next week. But in fairness to Drake, I don't think we should do that. So we will be taking that to the council next month. So if there's anything you want to discuss in that regard, we can put it on.
That's gonna be closed session, isn't it?
Yeah, or, any other updates to the wastewater treatment plant, we'll bring you the results or kind of the reaction to the tour.
Oh, yeah.
See how we're gonna
we
proceed
talk
there.
Public, if you got a video or
Good.
something.
Yeah.
Yes. And while I was meandering there, I had another thought that I lost, so I can't remember it, but it'll come back to me someday.
Right,
I think we talked about, with respect to the siting, our board had actually recommended like a joint closed session, right? So that we could have some dialogue with the council on
Yes.
the siting issue, but
council
that,
meeting
but that would need to be closed session, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yes.
Yeah.
after the next council meeting, or?
I believe, go ahead, I'm sorry, Drake.
I think we were going to talk about it in October, if I remember our
October?
conversation from earlier today.
Yeah, and based on our representative from Strand's availability, I'm going to say it'll be the second meeting in October.
All right,
And we have, our window's fine as far as getting things done.
On our schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
all right. Do you have any recommendations for future agendas, Lisa?
No?
Do you, Mark? Nope. Do you, Greg?
Nope. I'm good.
All right.
I'm good.
I don't either. So I'll adjourn the meeting then.
Thank you.
You.
Yep.
Have a good night.